So this Kehinde Andrews, he's based in London. He's a professional anti-white, lauded by the establishment, goes all over the television, and he's went to Orania, this little tiny sort of township, all-white township of Afrikaners in South Africa. And so you've got, say, 30 million Africans, and I don't know, I'm not sure what the demographics is. I think there may be 2 or 3 million white South Africans, and some of them have gone off and created a little town in the middle of nowhere and called it Orania. And this sort of cultural Marxist, he's a black man, he has gone to Orania and sort of, but he's shat all over them, really. And you can go on his Twitter account. I read his article today, and I thought it was one of the most disgusting things I've read for a long time. And what he just constantly smeared and slurred them all the way. And I thought, in reality, you've got a small bunch of white families who have actually paid for the land here and then built a little safe haven for themselves. And he was calling them Nazis. And then I couldn't believe it, because he said it's, even though like South Africa is the blacks, they control everything in South Africa now. And yet this Kehinde Andrews was saying that little Orania township can only exist because of the whiteness that South Africa was built on. Now, I actually understand what he means there. I do understand it. He's saying that, even though I think he's a complete liar, I know where he's coming from. But the problem is, how do you then deal with that? Because if he was a tiny minority, so whiteness is essentially, what they mean by whiteness is when a non-white is how a non-white perceives the society or the Western world which white people have built. And that's a bad thing because it's not inclusive enough. And so the problem then is that, well, look, if there was let's say you've got a country like England, Britain, and there was a non-white percentage was like 0.5%, then it wouldn't really matter too much. But this is where this whiteness thing is going, because it can be applied to anything they want. And what has got me worried about this is, what are they going to do to remedy the situation of whiteness then? Because they're not just 0.5% of the population, they're 20 to 30% of the population, and in a few decades' time, they're going to be, well, the majority. So what then happens when it's the situation like in South Africa, and now this absolute poison is being pumped into their minds, and we know who's doing it, but the premise is that in the future, there will be a society which is collapsing and falling apart, and the collapse will be blamed on the white minority. And by God, you can see how that's going to go. It's not, and it's right there. It's right there. And so I kind of like to get wrapped up in sort of philosophical things and stuff, but you still have to have one foot in the material world because of just what's going on. I don't see how even a white minority can duck that. If the prevailing orthodoxy is that there is this metaphysical force called whiteness which has to be purged, then how are they actually going to go about that? Where's this all going? Be afraid of that. Well, he has been equipped intellectually, if you could call it that, with a sort of a political philosophy which allows him to blame this mysterious force of whiteness on anything they want, absolutely anything they want, and they can apply it to anything. To get back to what you were saying about Distributor's video about where the witch, so now they can say it's the equivalent of giving these people, and I know who's given them it as well, we all do, it's the equivalent of a sort of telling them to go out and hunt demons, but they're calling it whiteness. Any kind of, it's like where whiteness is sort of the gremlins. if anything goes wrong in South Africa or in London, or if the society fails, or if the crime's too high, it's down to this mysterious force called whiteness. So how are they going to remedy that? Uh, you have to keep one foot in kind of down on the ground level and pay attention to what they're actually saying. It reminds me of that game Hangman, where you kind of guess a letter and or you got to put a word together, and you're building a gallows, and each stage there's another plank of wood, and then like a beam or a rafter, and the rope is going in. You can see this thing being constructed in front of your very eyes, and it isn't blatant, but it is there. So what is this thing that they're now talking about in terms of whiteness?